What makes a game a game? There is an entire branch of, I don't know, sociology probably, called game studies or ludology that tackles questions like why do we play and how do games evolve? But of all the game related topics to explore, the question, what makes a game is, to me anyway, the least interesting. Hey folks, I'm Rick Lamont, and with me I have my gaming mouse, my gaming keyboard, and my gaming tea? I used to spend a lot of time in the game Second Life, although some would argue that game is the wrong word. It was actually quite controversial if Second Life was a game or not. To understand that controversy, you have to understand what Second Life is. It's a third person, massively multiplayer virtual world, but it lacks the competitive or progress oriented goals that generally define games. For some, Second Life was a social outlet where you could interact with friends and strangers in a virtual world. It has a rich set of tools to let you build just about anything. And it has a vibrant economy where real world money can be exchanged for virtual currency and vice versa. These are all non game things, so why am I so adamant that it is a game? I have a few basic reasons. The first is that Second Life is, how do I put this? Game shaped. Yeah, I know. The second reason is that calling it a game is more descriptive to someone unfamiliar with it. Inaccurate or not, a computer game where you can socialize, build things, and even run a business is easier to understand than any alternative. Details can always be clarified later. But mostly, I think it's the wrong question. A much better, or at least more interesting question is, does it lead to emergent gameplay? Earlier I said that the question, what makes a game, doesn't interest me. That's because I think emergent gameplay, especially in systems not intended to be games, is a much more meaningful subject. Emergence is a big topic, and one which will take several videos to even begin to cover. But to put it as simply as possible, in a game, even one with fairly simple rules, more complex modes of play can, well, emerge, which turn a simple game into a more potentially complicated game, with multiple ways to play and more ways to achieve the in-game goals. If there is enough flexibility in the rules and people are given wide enough latitude on how to solve problems, they'll take it. And it could be a two-way street. If the rules don't suit the players, they just make their own house rules. I don't think I've ever even played a game of Monopoly or Dungeons and Dragons that was strictly by the rulebook. Video games in particular are usually designed to enable emergent play. It's almost always a desirable quality in a game. Solving problems in a novel way, more specifically, your way, is, well, fun. And afterwards, you feel like you've got a unique story to tell. But it can often be something the developer didn't intend and sometimes doesn't want. If a developer is paying attention, they can predict that new modes of play will emerge, but not always where or what they'll be. This can introduce chaos into a game or parts of a game that rely on stability. Some of these new modes of play might be better described as metagaming, but since metagaming is itself emergent, I'll just call it emergence. Emergent gameplay isn't inherent to all games, and more importantly, isn't restricted to games. And it means that many systems, including the non-game components of sufficiently complex games, can exhibit emergent gameplay. Some of these systems can deal with some fluctuations or a small degree of chaos, but once a threshold is exceeded, they completely crash. Almost all massively multiplayer games have some sort of marketplace, and some types of these are particularly susceptible. The first and most common type of virtual marketplace I call the company store since it's run by the developers. Using real-world or in-game currency, you can generally buy cosmetic items, crafting goods, and consumables, such as healing potions. Sometimes you can also buy powerful weapons or other items. It varies with the game and the developer. Because they are run by a single entity and the players have no control over the prices, these are the most stable types of markets. These are often the most profitable for the developer, but usually the least interesting for the player. Second Life is one of the few examples of the rarest type. It's an open market where the flow of real-world money is bidirectional. Like almost all multiplayer games, players can transfer money from the real world into their virtual wallet. Second Life, however, allows you to transfer money back out. Players can buy, sell, and trade with other players with almost no developer oversight. This gives the player an incentive to create everything from clothing to vehicles to houses and furniture, or rent out virtual property, or even provide various services. Sometimes it can be enough to supplement your income, or in rare cases, make a living from it. The developer takes a cut from currency conversions in and out of the virtual economy, but otherwise, in-world transactions are free from barriers. The economy is surprisingly resilient since it's tied to the real world. However, those same connections that provide stability means the developer must deal with the potential for money laundering and other real-world crimes, as well as conform to the laws of the dozens of nations where the game is played. I think the next type, the player storefront, is the most interesting. In this, players can or are even encouraged to sell excess items to other players for in-game currency. However, since the pool of items and currency are only limited by the amount of time someone is willing to put into the game, they are both effectively infinite. This leads to the sort of problems that would never be encountered in the real world's global economy and require fixes that are often temporary. Plenty of multiplayer games have gone through this, and some have dealt with it better than others. A good example is the multiplayer browser-based game Kingdom of Loathing. Some players had grown so wealthy that they were warping the economy, so the developers created ludicrously expensive prestige items. They had good stats, but certainly not good enough to justify the price. They also created special events designed to soak up excess meat in the economy. Oh, meat is the in-game currency. It's a strange game. The Kingdom of Loathing shop system is fairly complex, but offers players a lot of control. For example, once a player reaches a certain level, they can have a shop. They can put any of their spare items in it at whatever price they choose. They can set limits on how many of each given item an individual can buy each day. Since players have the choice to shop anywhere they wish, store owners can have one per person loss leaders to bring people in. Some stores run by seasoned players sell powerful consumable items cheaply to help out novice players. All that flexibility made emergent gameplay inevitable, and some players were spending far more time essentially day trading than they were playing the game itself. Setting minimum prices helped some, and the voluntary assistance of some still very wealthy players resolved the remaining issues. But for a while, you couldn't escape the mantra, the market is not the game. At one point, they introduced an elemental system. That, among other things, was added on to the already existing crafting system. I don't know if this was meant solely as a neat game mechanic, or if it was also meant to remove excess items from the marketplace. Regardless of intent, it had that effect, since most of the items could be turned into crafting materials, particularly for consumables. Stockpiles were quickly depleted, and they no longer filled players' storefronts where they had previously lingered with other shop-worn inventory. They also have a company store where they sell moderately powerful items for real-world money. These include limited edition items of the month. These items have nice stats, but not so nice that they give an unfair advantage and turn an otherwise free-to-play game into one that is pay-to-win. Players can turn around and sell these items to other players for in-game currency. As a free-to-play game, these powerful items are their only revenue stream. so they rely on a stable economy to keep the servers going. Rather than creating draconian rules or adding strict limits, they instead used a combination of appealing to vanity, adding new play elements and temporary events, and finally, they worked with the most passionate members of their player base. And then there is the Steam market. While it is not part of a game, it is certainly game adjacent. If you frequently use Steam, you might have some idea what I'm talking about. Regardless, the short version is that Steam has a virtual trading card system. When you buy and play certain games, you get virtual trading cards. As trading cards, they can indeed be traded, but they can also be bought and sold in the Steam market. They usually go for 3 to 10 cents or so. But some relatively rare or desirable ones can go for much more. I once sold a card for $10. There's also an associated crafting system where you can get certain items for completing sets. These can all be traded or bought and sold as well. All proceeds from the sale go into the user's virtual wallet account. You can deposit real money into the account as well, but once it's there, you can only spend it on games or virtual items. To buy and sell trading cards and items, Steam uses a version of the storefront that I call the consignment shop model. Commodity market might be a better term, but I like consignment shop. It feels friendlier. Players buy and sell items with Steam as an intermediary, that is, the consignment shop. Since there's only one place to buy and sell, players make bids and those bids are fulfilled in order at the desired price. In Steam's case, they and the game developer take a cut of the purchase, because for them, it's real money. I got curious about how it worked and if it could be, well, treated like a game. So for a few months, tracking my activities on a spreadsheet, I carefully bought, sold, and traded to find optimal strategies. I earned some decent profits, with which I then bought some games I wanted. Compared to minimum wage, it really wasn't worth my time, but I was having fun. For me, it was a game, a stock market simulator, with goals, constraints, and rules. This, in a nutshell, was Emergent gameplay. While there were fluctuations, the amount of real-world money that players were willing to spend was fairly constant, and that led to long-term resiliency. That, however, did not protect it from Steam's actions. During some of their holiday events, Steam gave away a lot of cards, flooding the market. And then, at least for the active traders like myself, the market all but crashed. For me, the game was over. It was no longer worthwhile to do anything besides sell the cards whenever I got a new game. Perhaps Steam ran the numbers and decided that greater volume would make up for reduced profits. But there are hidden costs. I found myself going to the site less frequently and buying fewer games from Steam because of it. Virtual markets can take other forms, either as hybrids or their own unique thing. If players have any input into pricing, there will be emergence. If trading or gifting is possible, then the market itself could emerge if a handful of enterprising players take advantage of the in-game trading on a large scale and create their own virtual trading posts outside the control of the developer. Emergence is usually good, but not inherently so. It can disrupt systems such as the in-game economy, make cheating possible, or even enable scam artists. But it adds a richness to the gamer system that the designers never even considered. Unanticipated modes of play can also increase player engagement. And for developers, that's something money can't buy with real or virtual currency. Because people will make a game out of anything, developers should assume that emergent gameplay will happen where you least expect it, that it will be unpredictable, and in some cases will upset balance or enable cheating. Almost all fixes will be reactive rather than proactive. The best you can do is identify sensitive systems to watch. But I think there is a danger in being too reactive as well. For example, the market might not be the game you want people to play. But as long as the economy is stable, why not let people play the game how they like? There might be a temptation to prevent emergence by removing all the uncertainty from the systems that require stability, especially if, like the company store model, there is potential profit. But as a player, I think that diminishes the game experience and makes it feel like I'm interacting with the developer rather than other players. In essence, it makes a multiplayer game feel, well, less multiplayer. It's better to manage the chaos by enhancing the player experience than to remove it entirely. Sometimes chaos is worth it. If you have ever played a game, you've likely done things that were never even anticipated by the developer. If you have some good stories, why don't you share them below in the comments? And while you're there, let me know your own experiences with virtual marketplaces. And as always, if you like this video or want to see more like this, you know what to do. Thanks for watching.